The realm. Do you know what the realm is? It's the 1,000 blades of Aegon's enemies. A story we agree to tell each other over and over till we forget that it's a lie.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back for another Game of Thrones Season 8 video. Today I want to give some of my thoughts on the Game of Thrones documentary, as well as talk about how I actually became a fan of the show and the books, and how it ultimately led to me creating my own channel. For those of you that don't know, HBO made a documentary about how the final season of Game of Thrones was made. They documented the inner workings of how a television show of this size gets created. I thought it was a fascinating look at how much work goes into a production of this size. They were also able to highlight all of the unsung heroes who work behind the scenes to help bring the show to life. We were also able to see some of our favorite characters film their final scenes. This wasn't only emotional for everyone on set, but it was also very emotional for the millions of fans at home watching these characters, who they followed for all these years, say goodbye one last time. As I was sitting there watching this, I started to feel this overwhelming sense of nostalgia. It made me think back to the days when I finally became aware of Game of Thrones and how it ultimately led me to where I am today. I know many of you have wanted to know a little bit about me, so I figured this would be a good time to tell you my own story about how I became a fan of Game of Thrones and how it led to me making my own videos about this show that I became obsessed with almost overnight. Somehow, Game of Thrones was on television for a very long time before I even knew that it existed. I was actually missing out on this amazing show for years because I was working so much that I did not even notice it. In fact, I never saw anyone talking about it on Facebook, and no one at my work was ever talking about it either. In order for me to find out about the show, it would take for something to go viral for it to even come across my radar back at that time. Now, you would think the Red Wedding would be something big enough to get my attention, but I did not even know about that as it was happening. I honestly don't know how I never saw anything about it on social media back then, but obviously I eventually did see something, and boy oh boy was it a very big spoiler. If it wasn't for Jon Snow's death, I might not be sitting here talking to you today. I can still remember it like it was yesterday. One night, I got on Facebook, and as I was looking at the newsfeed, I see a photo of a man dressed in all black, lying dead in the snow. Right above the photo was a headline that said something along the lines of, "Jon Snow died tonight on the Game of Thrones Season 5 finale." So I must have saw this right after that episode had ended. I remember I continued looking at the photo thinking, what the hell is Game of Thrones? Who the hell is Jon Snow, and why is he dead? For several days I could not get the image out of my head. All I could think about was that guy dressed in all black and his blood soaking into the snow underneath of him. By the end of that week, I had to find out about the show. I did wonder if there was some sort of a connection to his name and the location of his dead body. So, obviously, before I even started watching the show, I already knew that Jon Snow would die. Now, the good thing about never hearing anyone talk about the show is nothing else was spoiled for me before I started watching. I did not know about Ned Stark dying, nor did I know anything about the Red Wedding. The only thing I knew was Jon Snow would eventually die because of the photo. When I sat down to watch the show for the first time, I told myself if I don't like the show by the end of the second episode, I'm not watching anymore. I figured if I do not find it to be interesting or entertaining after the second episode, then it most likely is not a show for me. Now, there is a reason why I said that to myself. When I read the description of the show, it said it was a fantasy show. Before Game of Thrones, I was never a fan of fantasy, so when I read that, I was already very worried. I was not a fan of Dungeons and Dragons or zombies or even superhero movies, if I'm being honest. I always wanted to watch something that felt very realistic. It was always hard for me to get invested into something that made me drastically suspend my disbelief. If it did not feel like it could really happen or have actual stakes or consequences for the characters, then I wasn't interested. Well, Game of Thrones was actually able to combine all of these things in a way that did make it feel very realistic. Now, I have heard some fans say that the scene that made them want to keep watching was when Jaime threw Bran out of the window. For me, I did not even need to see that to want to keep watching. I was fully invested by the end of the opening scene, before the opening credits even began. As you all know, the opening scene begins at Castle Black. We see 3 men of the Night's Watch go out beyond the wall for some reason. At the time, you don't really know why they are heading out there, but the way the opening scene was set up, you could already feel the danger. The setting, the atmosphere, the black horses, and the black outfits set against the all-white landscape made for one hell of an opening scene. My imagination was already running wild. I still had no idea what kind of show it would be. Remember, the only photo I had seen thus far was the photo of Jon Snow. I had no idea about the White Walkers or dragons or shadow babies or anything like that. I had no idea what to expect. Then we see them find all the dead bodies, and even a little girl that has been mounted on a tree. I thought, what the hell is happening out here? What is out there in those woods? Then we see her again, and she's no longer stuck on the tree. Now her eyes are blue, and these creatures come out of the shadows to begin to chase the men through the woods. Any other time, I most likely would have shut off the TV when that happened. I would have thought, here we go again, another show or movie about zombies. I can't even explain the way I felt, but there was something about the way this opening scene was done that made me very interested in finding out what was happening in the woods beyond that big-ass wall. Like I said, I did not like fantasy stories before this, but there I was, getting fully invested into a show because of its unexplainable fantasy elements in the opening scene. Then we meet the Stark family, and I mean, come on, who did not love the Starks after their first scene together? Since it was the photo of Jon Snow that made me want to watch the show, I always had a close eye on the character throughout the entire series because I wanted to find out what led to his death. In the first episode, we find out some little details about who he is as a character. This was when I did realize, holy shit, there are actually a lot of similarities between Jon Snow and myself. Now remember, at this time we are led to believe Ned Stark is Jon's father, but Jon does not carry his last name. He doesn't even have his mother's last name, although we do not know who she is yet. I related to this immediately because I do not have my mother or father's last name either. Now this might be a little confusing, but before my mom met my dad, she was married to someone else. After they got divorced, my mom continued to keep the last name of who she was married to. I don't know why, but she still carries that last name until this day. So then my mom met my dad, then she had me, and my dad has never been in my life ever since. So naturally, my mom did not give me his last name, thank God. She gave me her maiden name, which means I grew up my whole life not having my mom or dad's last name, which is exactly like Jon Snow. Then we begin to see how Lady Catelyn treats Jon Snow, and let's just say my stepdad back then was the same way with me. When you grow up in that kind of environment, you want to get away as soon as you can. So what does Jon do almost immediately? He wants to join the Night's Watch. This I could also relate to. As soon as I graduated high school, I immediately signed up for the military. I wanted to get away from everything in hopes of finding some sort of purpose guarding my own realms of men. You can imagine, by the end of the first episode I thought, well damn, I am Jon Snow and Jon Snow is me. You can see why he became my favorite character. I knew exactly how he felt and why he wanted to join the Night's Watch. Now I felt like I had an even bigger investment into the show, but I was only scratching the surface. Honestly, I could not get enough of it. I went through all 5 seasons before that week was even over. Then I did something I have never done with any other show, and in fact, I still haven't done this with any other show. As soon as I was done watching all of the seasons for the first time, I immediately started them over again. Now as you all know, there is nothing like watching a great show for the first time, but the second watch had so much value because I was now able to notice things I did miss during the first watch. I watched it for the second time just as fast as I watched it the first time. Now I needed someone to talk to, but still, none of my friends were talking about it, nor was anyone talking about it at work. I had all these different ideas running around in my head keeping me up late at night, but I had no one to discuss them with. I had no idea there were thousands and thousands of fans already discussing things online. The only social media I was using back then was Facebook, and I never saw anyone talking about it there. I've never been a Reddit user either, so that never even crossed my mind. Then the Season 6 trailer came out, and that's what led me to YouTube. After watching the trailer over and over again, I was eventually recommended a video. That video was about Rhaegar, Lyanna, and Jon. And I had no idea anyone was making these theory videos online, but once I saw that, I thought, holy shit, this is what I need to do. This is how I can talk about this show that I love and all the different ideas I had about where I thought the different storylines were heading. There was only one issue. I did not know how to make videos because I had never made a video before. If you go back and watch some of my first videos, they are really bad. I did not know how to work a microphone, I did not know how to edit, I didn't know how to do anything like that. Also, it's very uncomfortable to sit alone and talk into a microphone. I really don't know why, I guess it's like a stage fright kind of thing, but it took me a very long time to start to get comfortable recording myself and releasing it for everyone to listen to and criticize. All that being said, I still wanted to make them anyway because I needed to find a way to discuss all these thoughts I had about the show. And thankfully, there are hundreds of thousands of other people out there just like me who want to do the same thing. Thanks to the internet, we were able to find each other and create a community of our own, where we can discuss these ideas with one another. Over 300 videos later, and here we are, at the very end of Game of Thrones. As I was watching the documentary on Sunday night, we were seeing everyone say goodbye to something that has had such a big impact on their life, and I know it has certainly affected mine. One of the biggest standouts from the documentary has to be Andy McClay. This man has been an extra on Game of Thrones for a very long time. I actually felt like he was a good representation of all of us. He is someone that fell in love with the story so much that he dedicated his own time and effort into showing exactly how much he does care. There is a scene from the documentary where Andy goes in to get some makeup done on his face. When he gets there, the makeup artist mentions how Andy's house was on fire, but he still showed up for work on time. Almost anyone else would have not shown up for work that day, but not Andy. He mentions how this helped him escape from his own reality of what was happening. If that isn't dedication, then I don't know what is. After hearing his story and following him around for most of the documentary, I could only hope that he was able to get another job on one of the new shows that is set in the A Song of Ice and Fire universe. I'm glad that HBO decided to make the documentary, that way they could shine a light on everyone that assisted in making Game of Thrones become one of the most successful shows in television history. I know many fans did not like how the writing was done on the final season, which I do understand because there were a lot of things that I did not like about the season either. But the documentary mainly focused on everything else that it takes to bring something of this size to life. I don't think anyone can say a bad thing about the show's special effects, the costumes, the makeup, the music, and even the set designs. How about that King's Landing set they built right on the studio lot? That looked amazing. Especially some of those houses that had balconies. They were so nice I thought, damn, I could actually live in one of those. Some of the hardest scenes to watch in this was when the actors shot their last scenes and said goodbye. Some of them have been here working with some of the same people for over a decade. We have literally seen some of these actors grow up right before our very own eyes. A lot of these actors were relatively unknown at the time, but thanks to Game of Thrones, they have now went on to become major celebrities. It would be very hard to walk away from something that has given you so much. For so long, Game of Thrones has been their security blanket. It was something that was always there for them, no matter what other jobs, big or small, were offered to them. I actually want to thank everyone who has done some work on the show. It has given me a lot of enjoyment throughout the years, and it also led me to finding this amazing online community of fans around the entire globe. Honestly, if it weren't for Game of Thrones, I don't know where I would be right now. It might sound crazy or dramatic to say this, but I can honestly say Game of Thrones came into my life at a time when I needed it the most. When I discovered the show, I was in a 5-year relationship with my girlfriend at the time. We had actually just got our first house together, and before we moved in, we decided we would make some renovations first. This wasn't very easy because almost the entire inside of the house needed to get redone, but we could not afford to hire workers to do it, therefore I had to do most of the work myself. So after I would get home from work, I would go right to the house and start working on it until I was ready for bed. This was at the same time I decided I wanted to start making videos about Game of Thrones. I was working a 9-to-5 job and remodeling our house and trying to make videos whenever I could find the time. In those early days, most of the videos were actually getting made when I was at work, during my lunch break or whenever I had some downtime. Well, right around the same time the house was done and everything was getting set up inside, guess what happened? That 5-year relationship came to an end. All that work and money that went into the house was for nothing. So you can only imagine what kind of mental state I was in, but I never said anything at the time because I wasn't looking for sympathy or someone's shoulder to cry on or anything like that. Now, although I still had my job, I was now completely broke from trying to get the house remodeled and furnished. So I had to actually move back into my mom's house until I could get back on my feet. This was before season 7 came out, so I wasn't making any money on YouTube. Thanks to my mom letting me move back in, I was able to work my ass off and save money until I could get back on my feet, which I eventually did. Now, whenever I wasn't working, Game of Thrones and the community was the only other thing I had. Whenever I needed to escape from my own reality, one of you were always there to talk to, and I cannot thank you all enough. And when I say Game of Thrones and the community was there when I needed it the most, I really mean it. Anyone who has ever supported me or their channel, I have to thank you from the bottom of my heart. It has been one hell of a ride to say the least. I do have some other videos I will be releasing this week. I hope to see you all come back for those ones as well. Thank you for watching this one. Have a great day, everyone. I will see you again very soon. Bye.